trip out here. And I will tell you that when we're up there taking these tough votes and behind closed doors, Representative Burchett is telling leadership, well, that's not what my constituency wants me to do, and he does hold the line, so you guys are very lucky to have him. I mean that. But a little bit about myself. So my name is Representative Paulina Luna. I represent Florida's 13th Congressional District, and never in a million years did I ever think that I would find myself in the House of Representatives. And in fact, it was quite the opposite. When I was growing up, I wanted to be an FBI agent, then I joined the military, and ultimately, the military, I think, really helped me turn my life around. In fact, my background is not your typical political pedigree. I was born to a young single mom. She had me at 20 years old. My dad had been in and out of jail, really suffered from a drug addiction. And actually, when he found out that my mom was pregnant, he actually had asked her to have an abortion, of which, to my mom's credit, she said, no, I'm not doing that, and she had me. So thank God for those young moms, even though they might not be married, that choose life, because it is truly a beautiful thing. Growing up, I walked into an armed robbery by the time I was around 9 years old. I had a cousin murdered. I went to over 6 high schools, in which one there was a gang shooting on campus, and barely graduated high school. And I don't tell you this to make you feel bad for me. I tell you this because there seems to be this stigma on the left that if you are within the government system and you're a minority, that you can't accomplish more and you have to vote a certain way or think a certain way because of those circumstances in which you're born into. And I'm living proof that through hard work and working in one of the greatest countries in the world, you can truly accomplish anything. At 19 years old, I decided I wanted to go to college, but I had no way of paying for it, so I'll date myself a little bit. Who remembers MapQuest?
Oh, yes.
Everyone, so now these kids have Google Maps, but I remember printing out MapQuest directions to a recruiter's office, and the Marine Corps recruiter was not there, but the Air Force recruiter was, and that's how I joined the United States Air Force. Cool. Shortly after joining the military, thinking I was going to be a young, independent, single woman, I met my husband, Andy, which I married after about a month of dating. We've been married for 15 years, so. In 2014, as Representative Burchett had said, he got pretty banged up. He had actually been shot while deployed, and thank God for pararescue, and at the time they were able to medevac him. Spent about a month with him at Walter Reed Medical Center. That was actually my first time in Washington, D.C. Andy was later on awarded a Bronze Star and a Purple Heart, and I will tell you that for all and everything that he's gone through, I told him, hon, if I can give you 10 years of active duty deployments, you give me 10 years of politics, we'll call it even, and so far I'm at year 6, so 4 years to go. But my dabbling in politics didn't start immediately. In fact, it wasn't until I was really working towards my gap year between graduating with my bachelor's in science and taking the MCAT twice that I started volunteering with a counter-child trafficking organization. And I realized at that point in time, even though I had not been really politically active, how much propaganda existed within the media. See, here I was, reading through their annual State Department report that was put out saying that the United States was one of the worst countries in the world for trafficking of children. And yet you had people on television, and mind you, this was around 2016 time frame, that were saying candidate Trump was xenophobic and racist for wanting border security. Yet here I was, a female Hispanic veteran, granddaughter of immigrants that knew what was happening at the border, specifically with women and children. I wasn't racist, I wasn't xenophobic, but yet I kept saying, people say, if you agree with this, and especially if you're Hispanic, you're a race traitor. So I did what any young millennial would do, and I filmed a video talking about it, and the comments that I got, you would think that I was the devil. They said that I was a coconut, which is supposed to be an insult, but it means that you're brown on the outside and white on the inside, of which I started laughing. I said, I'm actually more like a vanilla wafer, and they did not like that. It just got them more and more mad. And God works in special ways, because that video went pretty viral. And shortly thereafter, I kid you not, Charlie Kirk will tell you, just real quick show of hands, who knows who Charlie Kirk is? He knows Turning Point USA. Charlie Kirk from Turning Point USA calls me a day before I was supposed to go to medical school and says, hello, my name's Charlie Kirk. You might not know who I am, but I run an organization called Turning Point USA. Can you please come and be our National Hispanic Outreach Director and work alongside a woman by the name of Candace Owens? So I had 24 hours to decide. Was I going to go to medical school in Grenada, or was I going to go a very different path, an unknown path, but a path in which I felt that I could help people through legislation and policy. And it was my mentor that said, you have the opportunity right now to impact people's lives in a way that you probably might not be able to do, but you can always go back to school, so you should take that chance. And I'm glad I did, because the year I would have graduated medical school was the year I actually was sworn into office. That was in 2022. What I will tell you is, with my first run in 2020, I did not win. I then worked with an individual by the name of Newt Gingrich. Do you know who that is? Newt goes, you know, Luna, you're really smart. Do you know my story? Do you know how many times I ran? You should really run and win again. Of course I know who Newt Gingrich is. I Googled him, right? Like, I know everything about it. So I'm like, you know what, sir, I think I'll give it a shot. And I'm glad I did. In 2022, despite being outspent $12 million to 1, despite having a recruited candidate that was literally a defense attorney who represented child predators, I won. I became the first Mexican-American woman elected to Congress from the state of Florida. And shortly thereafter, because of what I was telling you earlier about not being a victim, embracing being a true moral person and standing up against groupthink, I actually had my very first hit piece come out from the Washington Post. A badge of honor. And I want to tell you about that, because again, I think God works in special ways, and it was actually Burchett that I think at this point in time, you know, I was a new member of Congress. I'd kind of already gotten, I guess, on the naughty list, because I didn't exactly vote for Kevin McCarthy right away. So they kind of said, you know, this one's not really going to be easy to just fall in line. And they had called around and asked and tried to make me look like a liar. They called my mom and asked my mom for proof that my grandmother died HIV positive, of which she was able to provide a death certificate that stated that, but they never printed it because it confirmed my story. In fact, this article was so egregious that after it printed, they were forced to issue multiple retractions, and Time Magazine contacted me and said, is it okay if we investigate your background? And I said yes, because when you have people with my story that are in positions of power that can fight back against the leftist think, especially the Democrat Party, it's a powerful statement. And so after investigating my background, not only did Time Magazine vindicate me, but they named me one of the most influential people in the world in Time's Next 100. Thank you. Shortly thereafter, during our second term, and after censuring Adam Schiff, of which Burchett helped me with that as well, so thank you, Burchett, I was named the task force chair to investigate some of the most grisly crimes in U.S. history, dating from John F. Kennedy, RFK, and MLK, which Representative Burchett's a part of that task force. And what you're seeing recently is kudos to Representative Burchett, but the big push to release the Jeffrey Epstein files, of which he was actually the one and the reason why we were able to subpoena Ghislaine Maxwell. And to sit there and put forward that request takes a lot of backbone. What I'll tell you is backbone is missing, and it's definitely hard to find in Washington, D.C. The fact that he did that, I can tell you, he is a man of conviction. But that brings me to my next, I guess, topic here, and that's what we're finding as our jobs as members of Congress. Yes, it's to vote and to represent all of you, but it's also to weed out the systemic corruption that exists in Washington, D.C. And going back to what Representative Burchett was saying about the insider trading, they were never going to bring that bill or that vote to the floor. In fact, it wasn't until Representative Burchett and I were literally sitting on the steps of the Capitol saying, well, we're just going to do it because it's never going to happen, that they started to talk about it. And shortly after we decided to announce to the press that we were going to do it, we were contacted by, he said, the speaker and everyone in between, saying that we were going to be the face of destruction of the Republic. I kid you not, they told us that we would be responsible for losing the House majority if we forced this vote. Shortly thereafter, Representative Burchett and I, our comms teams, were not contacted by the House conference to actually attend events, so they were targeting our staff because of the fact that we're willing to hold our own party and our own government accountable, especially when it comes to ending government corruption. So if you think the swamp is not real, it is. But I can tell you a few things. Our Treasury Secretary backs us, our President backs us, and more importantly, you and the American people back us. So we're forcing the vote. So going to some of our investigations and big wins that we've had as far as the task force is concerned, do you guys remember a few weeks ago, all of a sudden you started seeing these LA riots with Mexican flags and people burning it down over immigration? Do you guys remember that? Okay, doesn't it seem really similar to the George Floyd riots and the BLM riots and Summer of Love?
Yep.
Well, I came across this individual. Her name's the Data Republican. She's a data analyst and a financial, I call her financial guru on X, and she found out that an individual, a billionaire, funded by the Communist Chinese Party by the name of Neville Singham, is actually the one who's financially backing all of these protests. In fact, he's also tied to the Party of Socialism and Liberation and is an open admirer of Mao Zedong. What I can also tell you is that it doesn't just stop there. These same organizations that are trying to sow divide within our country are also backing groups like Code Pink. Bridget can tell you all about Code Pink. But what Code Pink does is, and I kid you not, they are actually tied to the Communist Chinese Party, but they're actually the ones that are vehemently anti-Israel. But they don't actually care about what's happening in Israel. They don't care about what's happening with Palestinians. They're simply there by the Chinese Party to sow divide within the actual country. And what I will tell you is because people like Burchett and I exist, because we can go there, we can confront this, and we are messengers, we can educate people, we also have the ability to bring forward subpoenas. As a result of that, Neville Singham has a letter coming from the U.S. Treasury that was sent by Chairman Comer that will be freezing his assets if he so chooses not to come forward and testify to Congress because he's been hiding out in Hong Kong. There's a quote from a movie that I love, and I tell you this because when I'm in DC and we're in these positions and behind the scenes, even though we don't talk about what's happening all the time, it sticks with me because it means something, and we've been in these positions, and it says, your soul is in your keeping alone. Even those who presume to play you be kings or men of power, when you stand before God, you cannot say, but I was told by others to do thus. For their virtue was not convenient at the time. This will not suffice, remember that. And when we're in Washington and we're put in these positions and we're responsible for not just voting, but actually truly holding our government accountable to end corruption, I think about that. And I think about the younger generation that's coming up. I think about, my son. I think about kids that are, grew up the way that I did and are looking to members of Congress that should be admiring what we're doing, should be fighting for the right things, and instead they're hit with, statements like, this country's racist and you can't make it in this country and it's not fair. And I'm living proof, a living example that, again, if you work hard, if you have faith in God, if you make for the correct decisions, you can have anything you want, but you have to have the willingness to fight and you can't use excuses. What I can tell you is, and I think kudos to President Trump, is we are no longer the old GOP. We are straight up on offense, and that's where we need to stay. We are the People's Party. We value truth and understand that is only accomplished through transparency. We value the Second Amendment. We understand that children are a blessing and the backbone of a strong country is the nuclear family. I say that because you see so many times and for so long, you had Pete Buttigieg who had his, whatever that was, chest feeding. So weird. The guy's taking paternity leave. What is that? Right? What is that? And that was supposed, if you called that out, you thought that was weird, all of a sudden you were a bigot. I'm a woman and I think that's weird. Just saying. We understand that, we understand that forever wars only hurt us and that peace comes through strength. Earlier there was a gentleman that was talking about the Peace Summit on the 15th, and I will tell you about a meeting that I had through the task force. We were able recently to meet for the first time since 1990 with the Russian ambassador. And as a part of my position on the House Democracy Partnership Institute, I've traveled to Romania, Moldova, all areas surrounding Ukraine. And I've traveled to the European Union and I've met with parliament members there. And what I will tell you is everyone who's experiencing war in Ukraine, they don't want it anymore. They want peace. And every single person I talked to, I even met an actual communist in the Moldovan parliament. And they said, we want peace, and the only person that can accomplish that is President Donald Trump. And at the same time, you have people who have portfolios with Palantir and Raytheon and Boeing, people on the House Armed Services Committee, people on defense appropriations that will advocate for war. They would be the first people to send your sons and daughters to die while they hide. Tell me how that is at all the type of representation we should have in Washington, D.C. people like me and Burchett, we back the president on his peace policy. And other people around the world, people who are low level, people that might not ever be in politics, people that are genuinely just faced with the reality that war destroys lives, feel the same way. And not to my surprise, when I met with members of the European Parliament, they sat there and said, some of them, it was always ironic, the ones that had the worst economies were saying, oh no, we have to go to war with Russia. Yet it was us us giving so much money to NATO, us giving all this money to the United Nations, it was us that were picking up the bill. So you have a lot of people that will talk the talk, but they don't actually want to shell out the cash, they want us to do it, and then guess what? When they get in trouble, we have to then bail them out. That's not ever the policy that we should have in the United States of America. We in the new party embrace the famous words of one nation under God with liberty and justice for all. And I say that and I emphasize God because it seemed like for a very long time under the last administration, they were trying to erase God from the topic. They were trying to erase everything that this country was founded upon. And what I will tell you is because of people like you, because of people that are in my district, because of people around the country that choose not to stay silent but to stay in the fight, whether it's through grassroots activism, whether it's through donations, whether it's through working on campaigns, or whether it's from being at events like this, it's because of you that we are able to rise to the occasion and to be our next generation of leaders and fighters. This country will only cease to do well and exist if you guys help out. And together, we will truly keep this country great. What I can also tell you is when I talk to President Trump, and we do talk to him on a regular basis, he says the same thing. He goes, Luna, these people, when we were on the campaign trail in Iowa, he said, if I don't win, this country will be so different from what you grew up in, and it's going to hurt your son. And I remember that, and I fought, and I fought, and I fought to get that man elected. But you know what? In my lifetime, he is one of the few politicians that has genuinely carried through on his campaign promises, and I can tell you behind closed doors, when it's 9 o'clock, when he could be turning it off, when he could be literally whining and dining billionaires and out with kings and princes of other countries, he's actually working on behalf of the American people. And when he's sitting there and he's dealing with people in Congress, he's brokering those deals. I mean, he will literally call you in and say, okay, here's the deal on the table. If you don't take this deal, you're a knucklehead. And he said that. I've seen him tell it to people. But I love it. That's who we need, right? Because in DC, you have a lot of ego. We will continue fighting for all of you. I know I see that there's a good governor's race happening, and I think you guys are probably going to have a senator probably appointed in this room. I don't know, Tim, what do you think? We'll see what I would say 2%. I would love to have a primary race in the Senate. But I want to thank all of you today for allowing me to come speak to you because that's the truth. The fact is that I don't want to do this forever. And part of what I feel that my objective and goal is to help not only get the message out there about how to save this country and how to continue to fight for it, but use my story, use my voice to empower others and also help recruit and lead the next generation of fighters that will help save this country. God bless all of you. I want to say thank you for having me to Tennessee. This is my first time actually doing an event out here and talking to a Tennessee group, so thank you for the invite. If you're all in Florida, you have a wonderful representative in Pinellas County. I know there's a few people that have places in St. Pete Beach, so we have one of the best beaches in the world. Don't tell Representative Gates that, because he was up in the Panhandle. I truly have the best beach. And I would love to have all of you. God bless you guys, and thank you.